Hello everybody, welcome to Sane Game Studios. I'm Sane, I'm an amateur game developer. Today on Gamemaker for Beginners, we're going to be taking a look at loops. I'm really glad that I got a request for loops because it's actually a video I've been wanting to make for quite a while. I forget what video it was in, but I was creating one of my tutorials and I had a loop inside the tutorial and I was like, do these people even know exactly what a loop is? Like, don't get me wrong, you really don't need to know what a loop is to be able to copy my tutorial. The loop works just fine in the tutorial, and if you copy the code, then it's going to do its job. But there are multiple different types of loops, and they can be used to do a ton of different things. So I'm really looking forward to making this video where you can just go over like a handful of the loop types, and we can just explain what it is that they do. And I'm actually just going to make a simple menu with each one of them, so you can kind of get an idea for what it is that they do, and just a very basic way that they can be used for. The vast majority of menus are built using loops, so in my opinion, it just makes sense to use a menu as the example for how we're going to use these loops. I'm not going to lie, there's a couple loops here that I have never used to make a menu, and they are the last thing that I would use to make a menu, but I bet ya we can make a menu using those loops. So realistically, there's 4 types of loops that are available for use in Gamemaker. There may be more. Those are the 4 that I found. It's not like the manual just had a page that was like, oh, hey, here's a list of loops. I just had to, look into it. There's 3 of them that I very commonly use, and one of them that I discovered while doing some very quick research on this topic. So the most common type of loop that you're going to see, and the one that I use the most, is a for loop. The next most common one that I'm going to use is a while loop. And then the last one that I usually use is a repeat loop. But there is also the do until loop, which I didn't know about, but now that I know about it, I think I'm actually going to start using it because it's pretty cool and I like the way that it operates. So what is a loop? A loop is a chunk of code that you want to execute over and over and over and over again, all in the same frame and a specified amount of times. You either want to continue running this code until it has ran it a specific number of times, or you want to continuously run the code until a certain condition is met in which you want to break out of the loop. And that is really all that loops are for. They are just for repeating code, and you can just set it to repeat that chunk of code for as many times as you need, and you can even punch in like variables for how many times that you want to run that code, and you can use that to loop through on a dynamic basis. A good example is I'm going to be using a for loop to draw like a list, like an inventory list of all the things that I have in my inventory. But I need to loop through that code as many times as there are items in my inventory. So I'm going to use the item count in the inventory to tell that loop how many times I need it to run. So with all that out of the way, I think we are ready to bring in an object and start creating a loop. So I have this room here, and it's honestly the exact same room that I've been using for my collision tutorial videos. The only difference is that I've changed the background. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to objects. I'm going to create a new object. And I'm just going to call this loop. Because that's all it's going to be doing, is we're just going to use it to create loops. And before I forget, I'm going to place it inside the room. So now that we have the object and we have it inside the room, now we can actually start creating some loops. And like I said, I'm just going to be creating a menu with each one of these loops, but I'm going to be explaining how each loop works as we go through it. So just to get this set up, I'm going to go to the create event and I'm just going to establish a couple things. I'm just going to say pause equals 0. Key up equals false. Key down equals false. And then I'm actually going to create a small menu. I'm just going to go menu, options. And now we're just going to fill all this in. So let's just go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it's actually kind of cool. We actually have 10 here. I did not expect to do a perfect 10. So I'm just going to go play, load, save, options, quit, other 1, other 2, other 3, and other 4. I guess also other 5. So here are all of our menu options. I went through the basic main menu options, and then instead of sitting here and thinking of a bunch of new ones, I just put these examples in, and it's going to work absolutely just fine. So actually the next thing we're going to do is we are going to go to the step event so I can set up my pause. So I'm just going to say that key up equals keyboard check pressed VK up, and then key down equals keyboard check pressed VK down. Pause plus equals key down minus key up. And then if pause is less than 0, pause equals 9. And then if pause is greater than 9, pause equals 0. So pause is going to represent my current position in the menu I'm creating, and then key down minus key up is going to allow me to scroll up and down on the menu using my up and down keys. And then these two lines right here are just saying that if I go above the top of the menu, if I go above the top of the menu, I want to jump to the bottom of the menu. And if I go below the bottom of the menu, I want to jump to the top of the menu. So then next I'm going to go to the draw event because I'm going to be doing all my looping in the draw event. I'm going to create a new variable and I'm going to call it RWH for room half width, and it is going to equal room width divided by 2. I'm going to create another one, and it is going to be my Y offset, and it is going to equal, 100. And then I'm going to create another local variable, and I'm going to call it my spacer, and it is going to equal 75. And then actually I'm going to bring in a font just because I would prefer to do this with an existing font rather than the default one. So let's bring in Born to Be Sporty. Let's crank the size up a little bit. And then that's going to be our font. So I'm actually going to go draw, set, font 1. So what I am doing here is I am actually going to be using this to, and I'm also going to go draw, set, H align. I'm going to go FA middle, or is it center? Yeah, FA center. And then draw, set, V align, FA middle. So what I'm doing here is I'm just grabbing my room half width so that way I can draw the menu directly in the center of the room. I'm creating a Y offset so that the menu is going to start being drawn at 100 pixels away from the top of the room. And then this spacer is going to be here to make sure that each entry on my menu is going to be 75 pixels apart. And with that, I'm actually ready. Well, and then Also, right here, I am setting my text drawing settings. I still have to set the color, but we're going to be doing that inside of the loop. And with that, we can actually go ahead and start building the loop. So the first loop we're going to do is we're going to do a for loop. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to type it out. And then once it's typed out, I'm going to go ahead and explain what everything is doing inside of it. So the for loop structure is just going to say for, couple brackets, and you create a local variable. I'm going to call it I, and it is going to equal 0. And I'm going to continue this loop as long as I is less than array length menu options. And then finally, I'm going to say I plus plus. So what is all of this? So a for loop it's almost like a function, and you got to feed it 3 arguments. The main difference is that you separate the arguments with a semicolon rather than separating them with a regular comma. So the first thing you need to do is you're going to need to provide it a variable that is only going to exist inside the loop. Traditionally, programmers use I for this. You can use anything. For example, if I ever have a for loop inside of a for loop, I'm going to be using I in the base for loop, and then in my second for loop that I nestle inside of it, I'm going to be using J instead. But the important thing is that you have to create a local variable and you have to assign it a value. 99% of the time, that value is going to be 0. Next, you're going to be providing it a condition. And this is the condition that while this condition is true, continue the loop. So I'm going to be writing a bunch of code inside of here. And all this code is going to be ran again and again. So it's going to hit the bottom, it's going to go back to the top, and it's going to run it again until this condition is no longer true. And once this condition is no longer true, then it is going to break out of the loop, and then it will continue running the code past the loop. And then finally, we have a loop end action. So what this is going to do is every single time that my for loop reaches the bottom, before it goes back to the top, it's going to look right here and it's going to perform this action. Again, 99% of the time, you're just going to be adding 1 to I, so that way eventually you will break out of this condition, and then we can also use I to loop through the values of something. In this case, we're going to be looping through the value in my array menu options. And as long as I is less than the array length, then we are going to continue looping through it. So what exactly is going to happen is that at the beginning of this loop, I is going to equal 0. And it will run all of the code inside of these 2 brackets with I equaling 0. And then when it gets to the bottom, it's going to add 1 to I, so then I will now equal 1, and then it will run all of this code again with I having a new value. And then once it hits the bottom, it will add 1 to I, which it will then equal 2, and then it will run all this code again. And we are going to use the growing value of I to loop through all of these options inside of my menu options array. So how do we do that? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be grabbing, because every single instance of this array holds a string, right? Right here I have a string, and every single option has a string of just words that I want to type into the game world. So to do that, I'm just going to go and I'm going to grab the string that exists in whatever index of the array that I currently is. So I'm just going to say var string equals menu options I. So when I equals 0, then the value stored in string is going to be play. When I equals 1, the value stored in string will be load. When I equals 2, the value stored in string will be save, and so on and so forth, all the way through to every single entry on this array. But now I also need the ability to distinguish which option I currently have selected with my pause variable. So to do that, I'm actually just going to change the color of it. So I'm going to go var col equals C red. But if pause equals I, call is going to equal C blue. And then draw set color call. So all of the options are going to default to the color red. But if I is equal to my current position on the menu, I'm going to change it to blue. And then in the next time it loops through this, so in the next loop, I will be one higher than pause, so it won't run this code and it will default to red again. So I'm going to have every single item on the menu be red, except for the one that I currently have selected, which is going to be blue. And then finally, I need to draw the text. So I'm going to go draw text. I'm going to draw it at room half width. I'm going to draw it at my Y offset plus my spacer times I. And finally, the string that I want to type is string. So this part right here is pretty obvious. I'm just drawing it in the center of the room using the variable that I got here to get the center of the room. But what is happening here? So all I'm really saying is that I want to draw the first item 100 pixels down off the top of the room. But then I also want to add my spacer to that, when in the first instance of this loop, I is going to equal 0. So spacer times I is going to equal 0. It would be Y offset plus 0. So then it's going to draw it at my Y offset. But then I don't want my next menu option to overlap with it. So to prevent the text from overlapping, I'm just creating a spacer that is going to space out each individual line. And I'm going to do that by multiplying it by I. So the first time, like my spacer is set to 75, right? So this right here is going to equal 0 when I equals 0. But when I equals 1, so it's drawing the, I believe, load. Yeah, load. I is going to equal 1, so spacer times I is going to equal 75. Y offset plus 75 is going to be drawing at 175 pixels from the top. And then on my second option, my next option, which is when I is going to equal 2, and it's going to be typing out the word save, it's going to be spacer times I, so spacer times 2, that's going to equal 150. My Y offset, which is 100, plus spacer times I, which is 150, it's going to draw 250 pixels below the top of the screen. And it's going to continue this until I have a list of menu options working its way down the screen. And to show you exactly how this works, I can actually just run the game now, and we should absolutely see this. So there we go. We have our menu, and it is being spaced out evenly the whole way down. And then if I hit my down key, it's going to move downwards. And then if I go to the top and press up, it goes to the bottom. If I go to the bottom, press down, it goes to the top. And I am able to just cycle my way through this menu and knowing exactly where it is that I have currently selected. So I'm actually just going to copy this and delete all this, because I feel like we're done with for loops. So the next loop we're going to do is going to be a while loop. And if you've watched my tutorials on how to do my improving platformer collisions, or improving platformer movement, I use while loops to get pixel perfect collisions. And I do that simply by being like, okay, so if place meeting, x plus my horizontal speed with a wall, inside of that check, so it means I am going to be hitting a wall in the next time that I move. I'm going to create a while loop, and I'm going to say, while I am not place meeting at x plus half my horizontal speed, I'm going to multiply my horizontal speed by 0.5 and then add it to my x position. And that is going to increase my movement towards the wall until I make perfect, harmonious contact with it. So what a while loop does is very similar to a for loop in the sense that you treat it almost like a function. You type in while, you put in the brackets, and then you have to provide it with only one argument this time. And this time what we're going to do is we're going to give it an argument in which it breaks the loop. And only when the argument inside of the while loop is false, the while loop will continue forever. And then once it hits true, it will break out a bit. And it's actually a little bit dangerous. I've absolutely frozen games and frozen my computers using while loops incorrectly and getting stuck inside of them. So you want to make sure that whatever you are doing inside of the while loop will eventually lead to the condition that started the while loop from no longer being true. You need to break the condition inside of the loop. So what I'm actually going to do this in a way that makes sense to me is I'm going to create a local variable, and I'm going to call it loop pause, and it is going to equal 0. And then I'm going to say that while my loop pause is less than my array length menu options. So when I first enter this loop, my array length menu options is going to be 10 because there's 10 entries that have indexes 0 through 9. And when I first enter this loop, loop pause is going to equal 0. So I need to make sure that inside of the while loop, I am doing something that is going to cause this condition to no longer be true. And once it is no longer true, then I will break out of the while loop. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to say that var string is going to equal menu options loop pause right here. I'm going to change I to loop pause. And then I'm going to draw text room half width y offset plus spacer times loop pause and string. So I'm doing the exact same thing that I did here inside of my for loop. The only difference is that the while loop is not going to increase this value on its own, so I need to do that myself. So at the very bottom here, I'm going to go loop pause plus plus. And what that's going to do is at the end of every single loop, it's going to add 1 to loop pause, and then it's going to loop back up to the top, and it's going to continue doing this until my loop pause eventually is bigger than or equal to the size of my array length. And then actually, if I run this right now, I should have a working menu that's going to look the exact same as it did with my for loop. As you can see, my menu is working just fine. Then actually, just to quickly prove to you guys that it is this object that's doing that, I'm going to go ahead and comment that line out and run this again. And I have nothing. And that's really all that I have to show you guys for while loops. like I said, you need to make sure that the condition that you set in here, because like the while loop will continue while this is a thing. So you need to make sure that inside of the loop, you are breaking your condition that enters the loop in the first place. Otherwise, you will never break out of the loop and your game will just immediately freeze the second that you enter the loop. So I'm just going to keep all of that code again. And this time we're going to be doing the repeat loop. So there's a couple ways that we can do this. I can legitimately just say I can repeat this 10 times. And then if I run this right now, you're going to see I'm going to have a fully functional menu. But what repeat does is the condition, it's very similar to a while loop where it is going to repeat forever until you meet the condition that you feed it. The only difference is that the condition that you're feeding it is the amount of times that you want it to loop. So I want this loop to repeat 10 times. But I can also say that I want it to repeat array length menu options. And it's still going to work just fine. And there's honestly not a whole lot to say about a repeat loop. It's very basic. Like I said, you feed it a number and it will just forever do that thing until it's done it that many times. Now, I can tell it to do this 100 times. And it's not going to... Oh. Loop pause cannot be greater than 10. Or greater than 9. But let's change this up a little bit. Let's go. Draw text, room half width, Y offset, plus, let's just do 50 times loop pause. And then the string that we're going to type is going to be the value of loop pause. And then let's go loop pause plus plus. And yeah, let's run this 100 times. And as you can see, we just have numbers going down. And it only goes down to 17 because that is where the screen runs out of room to continue doing this. But I promise you that outside of the game window, it goes all the way to 100. And that's just repeat loops. So you just give it a number and it does that thing that many times. And that is really just the essentials of it. So the next one that we have is actually do until. So do until is actually really cool. I honestly didn't know this was a thing until I started researching for this video. But you're going to structure it like this. And the biggest difference is that inside of the brackets on do, that is where you're going to put all your information for the loop. And then right here inside these two brackets after until, this is where you're going to put the condition that breaks that loop. And the biggest difference is like with while loops, for example, you're going to set it a loop breaking condition. But if that loop breaking condition has already been met, it's going to completely skip over that loop. It's not going to do any of it. Whereas with do until loops, it is going to enter the loop. It's going to execute all this code. And then once it's executed all that code once, it is going to look at this condition. And if this condition has been met, it is going to continue on. But if this condition has not been met, it's going to go back up to the top of the do loop and it's going to do it again. So this is really cool in the sense that do until loops will never skip past the loop. It will always execute all of the code inside of it at least once, and then it will do it continuously until the condition inside of the until statement is met. But like if you need something to always run at least one time, this is a great way to do it. So with that, let's build our menu in here. And then we are going to do this until loop pause is greater than or equal to array length menu options. So as you can see, I'm increasing my loop pause by 1 every single time that I go through this loop, which means that when I hit the until right here, like loop pause is already going to equal 1 because I've already executed this. But then it's not going to be greater than or equal to my array length because my array length is 10. So it will then go back up to the top and it will execute this again, which will leave loop pause at 2. So then when it looks at this here, it's going to be like, oh, loop pause is 2, but it is still not greater than or equal to my array length. So it's going to go back up to the top. It's going to execute it again. And loop pause is going to equal 3, and so on and so forth. It's going to continue doing that until this condition is met, in which case it's going to continue running code after the loop. And this is all actually I need to do to make sure that my menu is being drawn. So I can go ahead and run this and you're going to see, here's my menu. But let's change this up a little bit. Let's say until loop pause is greater than or equal to my pause. So now it's going to draw the menu, but it's going to stop drawing the menu as soon as it draws whatever position my current position on the menu is. So I'll just show you. See, it only has play, but if I move down, see, now it has load, save, options, quit, other, back up to just play. Ooh, but one thing actually I need to do is I need to go like that until loop pause is greater than pause. I think when I hit the bottom, it's actually going to crash. Let's see. Nope. Perfect. So as you can see, I'm able to draw my menu to whatever size I'm currently looking at, which is pretty cool. But there's a lot of uses for loops. If you watched my like my Zelda style health bar tutorial where I show you guys how to do the like the hearts in the corner and use those to display health, I use a for loop to do that. Actually, I think more specifically, I think I use a for loop inside of a for loop for that. But that's all that I have to talk to you guys today about loops. I just wanted to go over the 4 variations of loop and show you guys how to build a quick menu with them. Other than that, if you look at any of my movement videos, you're going to see me using while loops. But loops are very handy, and when I first got into coding, they were very intimidating to me, and I was honestly a little bit scared to use them without being told by a tutorial to use them. Nowadays, I'm fully comfortable with loops, and I'll just use loops, and like they're great. Like, I highly recommend using loops for just general purpose. They're very useful. I would go over use cases for loops, but I don't think either of us have that much time. But if you have any questions about what I have done today, or if you want to throw in some use cases for loops, or if you want to tell me about, a loop that I didn't know existed, you can go ahead and comment that down below. I'd absolutely love to hear about it. If you do have questions, I'll absolutely go to my way to try to help you out and help you understand all this. If you have any tutorial requests, you can go ahead and comment those down below. I have been getting a lot of tutorial requests lately, and I do have quite the backlog of requests. So it might be a while before I get to yours, but I do the community requested tutorials before I do the ones that I think of myself. But that's all that I have, so I'm just going to say thank you very much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I really hope you guys are having a good one, and peace out.